So hello and welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I'm your host Karl Smallwood, and today we're talking about 10 inventions meant to end war that failed miserably or made things worse. And this video is based on an original article by Ed Hatchett. If they provided social links for us, they can be found below. Go yell at them if you don't agree with anything written. I'm just the host. Industrialists are often honest about the benefits of war. It tends to drive innovation after all, but so does peace. So the following 10 inventions were all to that end, or at least minimising carnage. It's not their fault, they tended to make things much, much worse. Number 10, the United Nations. Right to it, I suppose. Formed as the League of Nations after World War I, the UN was meant to end war. It formally began in 1945, just months after the end of World War II. By 1947, however, amid the East-West conflict, it was clear it wasn't up to the job. The peace-loving major powers of a supposedly united planet were now too busy arguing over who got what for the spoils of World War II. Constructive committee meetings were impossible, and the UN's growth, including that of its all-important Security Council, was stunted from its very beginnings. Nowadays, things are no better. Clearly, in fact, they're arguably much worse, as corruption has become near institutionalised. For one thing, the Security Council members misuse foreign aid as a way to buy votes. Poor non-permanent member states receive as much as $45 million extra from the United States alone in important years. But this isn't the only reason why most resolutions are unanimously passed. Another is that where support is doubtful, invasions aren't put to a vote. This was the case for the 2003 invasion of Iraq. But it's not just corruption that cripples the UN's alleged intentions, it's also impotence. There are generally no consequences whatsoever for violating Security Council resolutions, as we've seen many times before. Number 9. International language. War is all God's fault, according to the Bible. Seeing us all working together on the Tower of Babel, he was appalled and came down to step in. Look, he said, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is the only beginning of what they will do. Nothing they propose to do now will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so they will not understand one another's speech. Henceforth, according to Christians and Jews, but not interestingly enough, Muslims, humanity was at odds with each other. What if we could undo God's mischief and restore some basic common ground, an international language that may help bring us all together, much in the same way it did in biblical myth? After all, language is more than just a manner of speaking, it also guides our worldview. Esperanto is one of the more prominent events attempting a language of international peace. Devised by the villainous-sounding Doctoro Esperanto, aka Ludwig Lazarov Zamenhof, that's a villain name in a Sonic game. In 1887, it draws primarily from the Latin-based, i.e. Romance languages of Europe, complete with a 28-letter alphabet. As a result, it's easy for many Westerners to learn with its simple, intuitive grammar and cultural flexibility. It's also straightforward for other people to learn, and as an added bonus, studying Esperanto before other languages helps accelerate the process. By 1915, following an uptake in the Russian Empire and then Europe, North and South America, China and Japan, the Iranian delegate to the League of Nations proposed that Esperanto be adopted by the body. Everyone agreed to, except for France, whose snooty delegate single-handedly voted against. After that, Esperanto speakers, or Esperantists, drew persecution from the Nazis, Spanish fascists, and the Soviet Union, all of whom correctly saw the language as a threat to their nationalism. In Hitler's case, it didn't help that Esperanto's inventor was Jewish. The paranoid Fuhrer imagined it must be part of the conspiracy. Number 8. Satellites. Konstantin Tchaikovsky was not called the father of astronautics for nothing. Not only is he credited with calculating escape velocity, but he also invented a multi-stage rocket to get there in the first place. It was steerable rocket engines, airlocks, satellites, space stations, and closed-cycle biological systems to sustain human space colonies. Without leaving the planet himself, Tchaikovsky even anticipated what is now known as the overview effect, whereby astronauts looking down on our lonely blue marble are struck by its beauty, its fragility, and the absence of borders. This, he believed, would eliminate war entirely. Writing in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, he thought that 2017 would see the first human spaceflight as well as world peace. So he was way off about one of those things and way off about the other. Life aboard satellites would, he thought, be utopian. Unlimited solar energy, artificial temperature regulation, so no need for clothing, beds or quilts, no heavy labour thanks to zero gravity, no resource disparity, so no social classes, and so on and so forth. What he didn't foresee though, apart from the decades earlier first human spaceflight, was the utility of satellites for warfare. While they haven't yet been used as weapons of war per se, though, never say never, thanks to the increasingly precarious outer space treaty, they're routinely used for reconnaissance, and it's really just a matter of time before they're mounted with lasers and or worse. Speaking of which, Number 7. Lasers and or worse. Laser weapons weren't exactly meant to end war, but they were meant to make it less deadly. Significantly so by cutting down on the human and environmental costs of warfare. Unlike conventional weapons of warfare, lasers are precise, accurate, and minimise collateral damage. Travelling at the speed of light, they're also capable of stopping incoming missiles, even of the nuclear variety, no matter how fast they happen to be travelling, and lasers themselves cannot be intercepted. However, they're also much cheaper. Whereas defensive missiles cost $1 to $10 million, lasers are about $1 to $10 a shot. Hence, they're rapidly becoming widespread, in addition to conventional weaponry. So, rather than supplanting conventional weaponry, they're enhancing it. And worryingly, they can also readily do something that other weapons cannot do with any consistency: blind soldiers. This was the reason they were originally banned by the International Treaty. If you're wondering how do you blind soldiers, you just shine a laser into their eyes. It's a real thing. Number 6. TELEFORCE. In a lengthy piece for Liberty magazine in 1935 titled "A Machine to End War," Nikola Tesla said he once thought, like other inventors, that war could be stopped by making it more destructive, but he realised he was wrong. Also a eugenicist, he believed it would take more than a century to breed out man's combative instinct. Instead, his solution was to level the battlefield and give each nation equal and insuperable defence. He called it the TELEFORCE. Although it would take a lot of power, he said it would form a protective field, destroying any approaching hostilities, men or machine within a radius of 200 miles. He described it simply as a wall of power against any effective aggression would prove fruitless, and theorised that if no country could successfully attack another, war would simply fizzle out. Although he was tight-lipped about how the invention worked, he said that it wasn't by death rays, which he also tried to invent and sell to the government. Instead, TELEFORCE projected particles with trillions of times more energy than is possible with rays of any kind. He also imagined that it would greatly improve television, removing all limits to the intensity of illumination, the size of the picture, or distance of projection. So 4K TVs, let's go. Despite the reverence netizens have for him nowadays, Tesla was very often mistaken. He believed, for example, that by 2035, the Secretary of Hygiene or Physical Culture will be more important in Washington than the Secretary of War. And while he is yet to be proven wrong, with 12 years to go, it's looking quite unlikely. Even if this TELEFORCE was actually built, it's obvious how it would have been abused to kill immigrants, for example, which, to be honest, Tesla probably would have supported, hoping, as he did for global eugenics by 2100, to sterilise the criminal and the insane. Number 5. The gay bomb. Surprisingly, the Pentagon had a plan to make the least deadly, most peace-loving bomb in the world. As recently as 1994, under Bill Clinton, the Department of Defense thought about deploying aphrodisiacs on the battlefield to make enemy troops drop their weapons and then their pants and start banging. According to now declassified documents, the sudden and widespread homosexual behaviour would cause a, and I quote, distasteful but completely non-lethal in enemy morale. If this relatively benign weapon seems out of character for the US, or indeed this video, remember that its enemies at the time were the fairly orthodox Muslims whose oil they wanted. So, with its gay bomb, the sadism was very much there. It was just psycho-spiritual instead of physical. Still, had they actually followed through with the Sunshine Project as it was called, war might have been very different today. Another plan was to release the smell of farts or bad breath among enemy troops, but who is this Who Me bomb, as it was called, had been considered since 1945, and it wouldn't be suitable for many invasions, as according to the researchers, and I quote, people in many areas of the world do not find fecal odour offensive since they smell it on a regular basis. Isn't that everyone? Does that everyone fart? Like everyone except for Shakira farts, right? That's the rule. Number 4, drones. Teleshirics, which is taken from the Greek words for distance and hand respectively, are remote technologies that allow manipulation from a distance while providing a safety buffer between the operator and dangerous jobs. Applications include space and ocean exploration, exposure to nuclear radiation, firefighting, mining, and most pertinent today, war. Writing in New Scientist in 1964, engineer John W. Clark, apparently preempting Avatar, described consciousness being transferred into an invulnerable mechanical body. Although that's not much of a way to end war, it does represent a way to minimise its cost in human life terms. Unfortunately, however, it's not that simple in practice because of the economic disparity. We say this because in most international conflicts, drones are only used by one side, and therefore not against other drones, but people. The result is less dignified, more shameful, but much easier way to wage war, exclusively available to wealthy invaders. In fact, ever since their first deployment in Afghanistan, just after 9/11, drone attacks have become so routine, they're hardly even reported on anymore. Number 3, nuclear weapons. In the past, it was thought that the bigger, more destructive weapons would ultimately discourage warfare. like walk tall and carry a big stick, as Theodore Roosevelt would say. Clearly they were wrong, but this hasn't stopped people building what remains the most destructive weapons of war to date. The Nazis came up with a plan, but the US liked it so much they brought the scientists to work on it in America. A little while later, President Truman became the first, and hopefully last, to drop it on civilians. Of course, the flaw in the nukes for peace idea was putting them in the hands of the least peaceful people on the planet. The bloodthirsty Truman hopped straight from nuking Japan to waging war against the communists. The rest is history. Nuclear warheads proliferated in Russia to balance the threat of the US, and neither side has ever stopped since, which in turn has forced other states to follow suit. Has this led to a more peaceful world? Well, no. It's true there hasn't been a World War III yet, but the nuclear powers themselves continue to invade other countries and kill its civilians. Number 2. Submarines. Narcis Montorio, the Spanish inventor of the modern submarine, thought it would put an end to war. A feminist, communist, and utopian revolutionary, he was hiding from the authorities at the time, holed up in a village on the coast. There, he was enchanted by the coral people dove for, which were sold as decorations for the home. He thought of the divers as being on a quest for a magical, and I quote, new continent beneath the waves, and was therefore deeply troubled when one of his new heroes drowned. So he got to inventing something that will make all of their lives easier. With the help of a master shipwright as well as a designer, his submarine resembled a wine barrel, which happened to be his father's trade, with its double olive wood and copper hulls wrapped at the ends. 23 feet long, the pedal-powered craft was also equipped with appendages for gathering coral. He called it Ixicnio, a word he made up from the Greek for fish and boat. Dives up to 60 feet lasting several hours were successful, and the inventor was awed by the experience, writing, in part, and I quote, the silence that accompanies the dive, the gradual absence of sunlight, the great mass of water, which sight pierces with difficulty, the pallor that the light gives to the faces, the lessening movement of the craft, the fish that pass before the portholes. All of this contributes to the excitement of the imaginative faculties. He wasn't even put off when a freighter crashed into the submarine while it was docked in Barcelona, destroying it completely. Immediately he set to work on Submarine Part 2, because I'm not pronouncing that word again, it's really difficult, which was larger and powered by a steam engine. Unfortunately, in his pursuit of investment, which he needed to feed himself, let alone build more submarines, the pacifists would caught the interest of military powers and even offered to install cannons on the subs. But nobody was interested, at least until the Nazis came along. Number 1. Manned aircraft. The first manned flight was not by the Wright brothers, but, and I'm quoting the original article here, Brazilian homosexual dandy called Alberto Santos Dumont, who was incidentally also the first to fly a balloon around the Eiffel Tower in a set time, and the first to wear a Cartier watch. What a claim to fame. Whereas the Wright brothers' secretive flight was just a catapult gliding, Dumont's 220-metre journey was verified by a panel of judges. Already despondent after the Wright brothers stole all of his glory, Dumont was further pushed into despair by the military use of manned flight. He imagined the prospect of aircraft dropping bombs would discourage nations from fighting at all. But he was very, very wrong. In 1932, racked with guilt after seeing them in action, he returned to his hotel room in Brazil and, having told the elevator man he'd made a big mistake, unceremoniously hanged himself. And that was long before the nuking of Japan. So thank you for tuning into this episode of TopTenz. I'd hope that the video, if not entertaining, was at least interesting. It was certainly enlightening for me, your host, Karl Smallwood, who also hosts for the sister channels to TopTenz, Geographics and Biographics. As noted, this video is based on an original article by Ed Hatchett. Links to all socials for everyone involved in this video can be found below, no doubt. If you like the video, leave a like. If you have a comment that's angry, you can direct that to the comment section or the author's socials, not mine. Like I said, I'm just the host, guy. I'm just the host. If you would like to see more of my work, I have a channel called Fact Fiend and another called Wiki Weekends. As always, thank you for watching, and have the day you all deserve. Cheers.